Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.
Welcome to all.
History is made of stories.
In this episode, we'll be talking about the thorny issue of how to manage people who are working from home.
Most of us have at some point had to deal with overzealous supervisors who seem intent on micromanaging everything instead of pursuing a healthy and constructive approach to management.
Still, a lot of managers now seem worried about the idea of working from home. So, how should they manage people who are working remotely? What's the story?
Let's start by going over a few management essentials before we get into the specifics of work from home. Management is above all about delegating responsibility and giving people a degree of autonomy within a clear framework, all of which is underpinned by two other pillars of management: control and trust.
So, to read between the lines, you're saying work from home raises questions about our relationship with the concept of control in management. That might actually be the reason why remote working leads some managers to be too hands-on, because they're worried.
What we're talking about here is the understanding between the manager and the employee. It doesn't matter whether it's on-site or remote management. A good manager can establish a few clear ground rules for everyone that define the relationships and conduct expected of professionals in their respective jobs.
That's true, and to do that, they first have to establish a solid framework and working methods for employee-manager relations to allow for any potential environmental changes linked to the job and the business as a whole, as well as any internal changes needed to adapt the organization.
Which means you first have to establish a clear understanding, a kind of contract or agreement that ensures both sides know their scope for action but also the limits of their responsibilities. That involves laying down a few clear ground rules that everyone can follow.
And that's where management skills come into play. It's about striking the right balance by being neither too overbearing nor too lax in defining a framework to guide teams and individuals.
If the framework is too restrictive, it might hobble and inhibit people, preventing them from being proactive.
True, but on the other hand, if you don't establish clear rules, then things can quickly get out of hand. Lack of clarity can breed dissatisfaction and demotivation.
So, it all comes down to establishing the rules and ensuring a mutual understanding, even though people used to think mistakenly that on-site managers didn't need that sort of arrangement. It's obviously crucial in a remote working environment.
There's basically no difference between remote management and on-site management. It's just that distance exposes the shortcomings of our management practices in establishing a framework for delegation and related rules.
But beyond establishing that framework and rules, which, to be honest, is not always done well, the foundations of management come down to one thing: trust.
To recap, managing people remotely is basically no different from managing people in an office. Working from home doesn't require any sort of extra management, but it does give us another reason to work on those management essentials. And trust is the bedrock of any effective management practice, remote or otherwise. Is that right?
Exactly right. Way to make a long story short. Story RH, the podcast that makes a long story short.